All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Provo City Landmarks Commission hearing for April 15th, 2026. And we will begin with the roll call starting at the left, my left. If the committee members will state your names and if you have any conflicts with this applicant.
Wendy Ullman, no conflicts.
Jeff Ringer, no conflict.
Eric Carter, no conflicts.
David Ammett, no conflicts.
Susan Kruger Barber, no conflict.
Florence Hawkinson, no conflict.
All right, and just a note of decorum, although this is a public hearing, only the presenters and those invited by the committee may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on. When speaking, please be sure to use the microphone to speak into the microphone so that the record is clear. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Please limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the chambers. Please do not attempt to interrupt or speak over people. Intimidating or threatening speech or behavior will not be tolerated at any time. Please refrain from clapping, cheering, booing, or being otherwise disruptive during the hearing. Excuse me. Today's item number 1, Merrill Van Leuven requests a Landmarks Certificate of Appropriateness for a restoration of a historic home in the R1.6 one-family residential zone located at 690 West, 300 South in the Franklin neighborhood. And we'll turn the time over to Dustin.
All right, thank you. So you'll remember this property back in February came to our Landmarks Commission hearing. At that hearing, the Landmarks Commission approved portion of the work on the wood and different restoration on the exterior. And then you guys continued a portion of the request, which was the balcony and the porch area, to give the applicants more time to generate some more detailed drawings for your review and consideration. So I've got those here for you. They're in the packet. Just for reference, I have a couple of historic images in the current house to help kind of orient and see what was there before. And then we've got the drawings. So if there's anything specific you want to address there, those are kind of slides that I have for you. And then the applicant, I'm sure, would be ready today to kind of talk through these drawings that they've come up with to address those questions that came up in our last meeting on this item.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Dustin before turn the time for the applicant?
Yes, I do have a question. And if this isn't the right time to do this, you'll let me know. But I'm curious about the procedure. If we were to approve something, we move forward, the applicant takes this to the building department, and in permitting, they say, no, this doesn't meet code. Does it have to come back to us, or have we let it go?
So if you approve something, next step would be that it'll go to the building permit review process. If in there they had some issues with current code, is that kind of what you're asking about?
Yeah.
If there was something that needed to be modified to be able to meet the current codes, they would let the applicant know what those things are. I'm sure we could have a discussion. I could have a discussion with them if it's something that to remedy that, to get it to work, was going to alter kind of the look
design
of what it's going, then I would probably recommend that it comes back, and so we could just keep that option available, just to bring it back to get everyone to weigh in if it didn't seem like it was something that was going to affect much of the look or change what did get approved, then I think we could just let them kind of work to meet the code and move forward that way, if that answers and addresses your
Yes,
question.
that does. Thank you.
I appreciated Florence's question. Just anticipating the discussion with the contractor. What is code for balcony height as far as railings are concerned?
That's a good question. I'm not up to code on that.
They're 36 inches
Is it 36? Okay.
from the floor to the top
Okay.
for residential. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dustin. We will now invite the applicant to give their presentation. You'll have 15 minutes. When your time is up, you'll hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. And following your presentation, if we have questions, we'll invite you to come forward again. So please remember to state your name and city of residence for the record.
Merrill Van Leuven, City of Santa Quin, Utah. So based on what feedback we received from the last meeting, I appreciate that feedback, by the way. Presented some drawings for you to give you an idea, a better idea of what we're planning to do. Granted my limitation on using professional software, I decided to use my other talents and draw it by hand. So you'll see on the top view, you'll see the size of the actual deck. So 27 feet 7 inches long by 6 foot 10 inches deep. The whole structure will sit on an existing concrete pad, and we'll be doing some footing work on that pad. Because of how the historical renderings show, we will be putting an extended footing underneath each post because they had double posts in the original. So we'll be doing that. That may require some concrete work underneath, but we'll make sure that we have the stability there. The footings will go 36 inches deep by 24 inches wide to accommodate those. On the other upper right-hand page, we have some of the mitering work that we'll be using for the posts as well as for the balusters. The upper left-hand picture shows what the baluster will look like. And then the bottom two, you'll see the post bottom, post top, and then the one on the right is the extended post. We do have an original post that we are referring to for this mitering work. And I've measured where all those cuts are supposed to be made according to that post. And so all the posts that are supporting this structure will look a little bit better than that. And then as far as the gingerbread, you see the lattice patterns and you see the gingerbread from the posts at the top. That will be used under the support beam, the main support beam for the deck itself. I know last time we mentioned that the original height of the railing was under 36 inches. I've gone ahead and I'm happy to adjust this if needed, but in my plan, we're going to go ahead and do a 36 inch. If you're okay going, you know, we want to be strict about the original look, we can lower that and then add a handrail above that so that it's to code. So that's a discussion that you'll need to have. And I'm happy, like I said, to adjust. So I think that's all I had.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Now, as a commission, we will have internal discussion, and if there's any additional questions for the applicant, we'll call them back up.
I just had one question for the applicant. I assume with your reference to mitering, all of this will be wood, none of it will be vinyl or any other material.
That is correct.
Okay.
I have a few questions for you. Well, first of all, thank you for giving us these drawings and showing us what it was, what your design intent is. This is very helpful. One of the questions I had is on the railings.
Mhm.
It says that balusters, there it is on the bottom right, balusters are scaled or spaced every 8.37 inches.
Mhm.
How wide are these?
They're no more than 2 inches.
Okay, so then that puts between them about 6.25 inches. And my understanding, this is why I asked about the code, because my understanding is code is a 4-inch sphere cannot pass between the balusters.
Oh, okay. We can tighten that up. That's
Okay.
not a problem.
Is that your understanding too, Eric?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I did, just to clarify, is I counted on the picture of the original, how many balusters they had.
Mhm.
And then I input that, but yeah, we can shrink it down and keep the same look.
Yeah, it definitely is not to code,
Okay.
to today's code.
We'll make it to code.
And then the scale, let's look at the drawings again, that footing.
Mhm.
So it appears that the post is going to go right into the footing.
Mhm.
And that top, it says ground level. Does that ground level mean that it's the top of the concrete or the top of the dirt?
Yeah, so we'll be cutting out the footing area from the concrete and then building that all the way up to level of the concrete. So that ground level then becomes the bottom floor, if you will.
Oh.
So wherever the concrete is, that's where the footing starts, and then it goes 36 inches down.
Okay, what I'm familiar with in this construction, and this is getting really into the details.
Okay.
So I want to know there are a lot of ways to do things.
Right.
But what I'm most familiar with is that you put a Simpson anchor into the concrete footing,
Mhm.
and that holds the post and it holds it up so that it's not sitting at the same level. And often the post
Okay.
pops, or excuse me, the concrete pops up a little bit so we don't have the decay issues with the water.
Right.
How do you intend to deal with this? Is the post actually going to go down like that? Help me understand, please.
When I initially drew these, I was intending to do that, but since then it's like, well, I don't know if that's the best approach. I do like the Simpson approach. The only drawback with that is you do see visible hardware on the outside.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to be mindful of that. I suppose there are some ways to alleviate that. We can look at alternatives so that you don't see exterior hardware, but the hardware is inside the post. Instead, we could screw something up inside, probably 6-10 inches. or
You could
so.
also do a pour back and do it in two
Yeah.
lifts.
Yeah, we could do that too. So that's a great question. Let me think on that.
Okay. Then another question is the historic reference for the design.
Mhm.
In particular, I was concerned about the baluster that's shown 16 inches high. And in looking at historic references, I could not find a baluster that had a sphere on it.
Okay.
Would you be open to receiving or looking for historic references? Because those pictures the pictures that we have give us an idea, but they don't give us the outline.
Okay. So to prep for this, I used a lot of resources to try and find for Victorian era. And there's a wide array of information out there. So looking at the picture the original picture, then trying to piece together what I was finding in my research. That's what I came up with, but if you want a different design, I'm happy to accommodate.
Well, let's look at the photos. Can you move to, oh, we are there. Okay, the old, yeah, that one right there. What I'm seeing is that we have some kind of weight on top, which you show, and then it comes down like, kind of a teardrop.
Mhm.
And then we have the bottom. And, I'm not seeing that sphere there.
Okay,
So I think it actually could be simplified a little bit.
okay.
But I'd like to represent that, that shape a little bit more.
Okay.
Well, I can't tell you what to do right now. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking if you can look at that.
Florence, are you thinking like a sphere with like a some sort of base? So the sphere is not resting directly on the posts?
I have some images, but
Yeah.
can they be shown, or how do I deal with that?
While we're emailing, can I just ask one additional question? Can you interpret those upside down seagulls between the posts? What are those?
Just a filler. Can you go back to the picture?
It does appear that there is something
There is something
there, but what would you?
I think what I would do based on what I'm seeing in this picture is a modified gingerbread that doubles up. It'll be smaller, but then just double up and kind of morph together in between the posts.
And would that be solid, or would that have some fretwork that would
It
make?
would have some front work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I would want it to match what's on the wings of the posts so that it looks like it's a continual piece instead of,
right. My concern was just that it would be a solid, which would, have all this sort of activity, the visual activity with the, with the punches made and all of the other, that then would die if those were just solid,
no,
pieces of
yeah.
wood stuck between those posts.
We'll make it so that it matches the
Okay.
outsides.
While the pictures are being put up, I wanted to ask the commission something. So the last time we met, I was kind of the one that didn't want these railings to go all the way to height, rather put a bar at the very top to reach the 36 inches, but keep the balusters lower to match the historic proportions. And I would still love that to happen. That's what the recommendations are from the Secretary of the Interior. Because if you take those balusters all the way up to 36 inches, the railing looks a little bit etiolated. It looks stretched out. However, I'm not going to be a stickler if no one else on this commission cares about that.
Can I ask a little follow-up about the recommendation for the Secretary of the Interior?
Sure.
Is that generally when the railing is existing and they're restoring it, or is it when they're refabricating it like this is?
Really for both situations. When a railing is too short, what they recommend is that some, in the case of an existing railing, I guess what you'd have to do here if this existed is take off those finials and raise the supporting posts up, to be the 36 inches and then put the bar. But certainly in the case of reconstruction, that's much easier. What I'd like you know, there are several examples of high railings that are way too high in Provo. Be wonderful to have an example of how it should be done that we could point people to in the future and say, follow that. But again, I'm not going to be a stickler. I think this is a fabulous project. Tremendous amount of effort is being put here, and I don't want to throw sand in the engine where it's not warranted.
I appreciate that, Dave. I'm thinking about what the story would be, either way. For example, if we recreate the original height and add a post, that tells us, I mean, that story is, this is how it was to start with, and these are current codes, and kind of telling the story how it really is. And I think that that's what historic renovation and that's what it's about, is telling what happened in history. If we just make them taller, I think that would be all right too, but it tells a different story. It says somebody came in here, and it tells the story of how it was destroyed, and then we came in with the new code. So I think either way is acceptable because they're both telling the story of the history. How's that for not giving you a yes or no?
Yeah. I agree.
My personal preference would be to put it up higher and not put a rail across, just because it would be less distracting in my mind. But I can see why you're doing that. So
Well, and the rail that they recommend is actually just a thin metal bar. So
Yeah.
when you look at the railing, you're seeing the wood components, and the bar just sort of melts away. It can even be painted a different color to, you know, to sort of visually disappear. But anyway,
No, I think you raised a really important issue because as in the years we've been doing this, we're dealing with a physical object that both is an important snapshot in time, but it's also still a living entity. And so which story are we telling? Are we telling this historic structure as it lives throughout the years, and it will naturally live in a little different form than it did 100+ years ago? For me, I've seen enough clunky attempts to retain the original snapshot and then add a modern element on it that it's more visually disturbing than increasing, in this case, than increasing the height is. So I understand and I agree with what you're saying. I'm probably leaning a little bit toward where Florence is in terms of heightening the original look of the railing rather than adding a modern element to meet code.
any other thoughts?
okay.
Merrill, did I say your name right? I'd like you to take a look at some of these balusters that I found, and particularly on the top left, the one that's kind of a yellowish, and in 1, 2, 3, 4 from the left. That's what I was talking about, the teardrop kind of thing. I feel like that's closer to what, and it's not exact. I don't think we're going to get exact, but that one does have a sphere on it, if you want it to do that. But the other, any comments about any of these? Also the top right, those seem to be, they're a little heavier, but, and the problem you run into with that is the code issue, that if you have too much of a bulge at the bottom and you get those, they're going to have to be really close together in order to keep the 4-inch there. And David, are there recommendations on if we spread these balusters out and the spacing is too wide, do we put some kind of
Intermediate, like,
glass or plexi or something like that to keep it from to keep it in code compliance? Do you understand?
Well, to me, if you put it like to answer your question directly, the Secretary of the Interior doesn't have a recommendation like that but I don't think you'd want to introduce anything like a plexiglass or even a sheet of, tempered glass. I think you just put like a simple rail, so that again, the idea would be when you look at this balustrade, the more complicated baluster would be what catches the eye.
Okay, so you're saying keep the spacing of the turned elements the same, and then put a small rod that's painted for disguise, for,
Yeah, similar to, what you do with the extending the railing, reaching code without actually stretching the balusters. I think the idea with both those approaches is that what would actually catch your eye when you look at this, especially from a distance, would be the painted, in this case, wood elements that are more decorative, that are more, literally eye-catching.
yeah. The last thing that I wanted to bring up was on the drawings and the last sheet of drawings. There's the post. Yes, top right. And I also noticed it in a few other places that the scale, particularly in that post, it's not drawn exactly to scale like some of the other ones are. And if we look at the bottom, that 5.5 inches for the width of the post, and then you compare that to, for example, the 12.5 inches, we can see that we've got a couple different scales going on there. So I feel like I'm not getting the full, the accurate view of what the proportion is.
Sorry, can I just clarify your question?
Yeah, yeah.
So is it compared to the footings? Or-
Over on the far right on the
Yeah.
post up there,
Big post.
and there's a measurement there that says 5.5 inches wide.
Right.
And if we look up near the top of the post, we can see that decorative part is 12.5.
Oh,
The 5.5 is 1 square, and the 12.5 is 4 squares.
I see.
And then the 33 is 5 squares.
Gotcha.
And so it's, even though it gives us, you've given us some really great details, I feel like overall I'm not getting the feel of the proportion the way that you might intend it.
Okay. Would you like me to redraw those so that they're to scale?
I don't know if we're ready for that kind of decision. Are
Okay.
you offering to redraw them?
Well,
And the 118, I'm not sure where that's getting. It's just that I don't think received the attentiveness that some of the other detailing did.
okay.
So, and I get it. I'm, I've drafted and I hated putting my stuff up in front of people. But I feel like it's really important for us to understand the proportion. You've done such an excellent job of laying this out in other places. I'd like that. And also the bottom right, the rail post, you can see the 5.5 inches is like almost, it's 2.5 squares,
Okay.
but the
Yeah, I
36
see that.
inches isn't quite there. So I think you've done, I think you've made huge progress, and I think you're going in the right direction. But I don't think I'm supposed to say my opinion yet. I always jump ahead. I do have one more question while you're up here. On the footings, and we've got a top view that says 24 by 12.
Mhm.
And then you have a drawing next to it that, where it's at an angle. Does that,
Yeah.
where does that occur?
That is just in that one corner. If you look in the upper drawing, how you see where that corner is, you'll see 3 posts there. So that's kind of a square footing that we'll have to put in, or an L shape at least, to ensure that we capture those 3.
Can we go back to the detail? There's
So the
a
upper left
24 by,
drawing shows those 3 posts right there. So that one will be at 24 by 24.
oh, okay. I was looking down at the bottom.
Sorry, I missed that on the drawing.
Okay, so what's up on the floor plan is accurate
Yes.
and, okay, okay,
Yes.
that's good to know.
Sorry. I'm not a professional drafter. I build things.
Yeah, you're doing fine.
Okay.
I'm curious about the concrete slab. Like it's much thicker, I think, than the original. So for me, possibly regarding, as I play with it with my finger, looking at this again and again, the taller might feel better on top, just as a visual thing, because the concrete slab so much thicker. Is that correct, or is that just the drawing from the original porch area? So the balustrades being taller might feel better to me looking at the porch. That's all. Did that make sense to anyone? What I was talking about? Like the thick middle part, this part is going to be thicker. So maybe having the short. Can I show you? Does that make sense? Or am I just coming out of without a knowledge? Yeah, this versus
The part that's the roof of the porch
versus
and
here.
the floor of the balcony.
Is this the same, or is it going to be a lot thicker?
The middle portion,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get
And
it
the
to be
part where
very
you're
similar.
showing us all of
Below
the,
the railing
the
and
draining of
balustrade.
it.
All the support stuff.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, but like, so sorry. This
it-
part, when you were describing to us to make sure the drainage and the,
Oh, I see.
so,
Yeah, that'll be included.
and
within
is it
that
a little
support
bit
structure.
bigger, or is it than before?
It should be the
Or it's
same
about
as
the
what I
same?
had on the
Okay.
drawing. So
Okay,
typical joists run anywhere from 10 to 12 inches, depending on what type of deck you're building. And so I've included enough space in there to accommodate the drainage system as well.
yeah. I just was thinking, doesn't that already affect the proportions of the balcony with the balustrades
Oh,
and things? And so maybe as an argument to having to code balcony, it would look nicer than having do you understand me? Okay. Maybe it would help with the proportions if that's like so much bigger, and so that it doesn't look, I don't know. I can't see it in real life, but it's an argument towards allowing to code balustrades, because if there's a thicker in between.
Yeah, I think that what she's talking about is the 9.25 or 9.5 plus the 13.5.
Yeah.
That distance right there. And
Thank
if we
you.
look at what's existing, or excuse me, if we look at the historic photos,
Yes.
our 9.5 plus 13, that is 23 inches versus, yeah,
Do you see what I'm trying to say?
I do. And
Because it would look icky to me to have a little strip other if it's bigger.
I think that he's actually got it about what it
Perfect.
was.
Good, thank you. That's
Um,
what I need to
And
clarify.
I mean, I think if, no, let me rephrase that. I think that having the lower, like David suggested, having these shorter would give us the original historic proportions. I think doing it the way that it's drawn and doing it to code would change the proportions.
That's-
And I think it's a good point, you know, do we want to keep the historic proportions or not? And I think we kind of talked about that with the top rail, but what about these
middle,
center?
this part, yeah.
Slightly different subject, and you may have mentioned this and I just missed it, but is it the intention to reopen the porch for use? So the door on the left, would that be reopened again and this would be a usable space?
So the client has no plans to reopen that.
Okay.
However, we're going to build it so that if she sells the property and
It
someone
could
else
be.
uses it, then it is usable.
Okay, thank you.
For context, during the last meeting, I believe I remember you saying that existing historic door is just behind that sheet of plywood. So
Oh, the door's still
just
there.
removing
door's
it
still
will
Fabulous,
maintain that,
fabulous.
that character.
So yeah, when the deck is built, we'll remove that plywood.
Great.
I've got one final question, again, about proportions. If we could go back to the historic photo of the house that, or the previous one, or the alternative, yeah. With these posts, just looking, the supporting posts at the bottom,
Mhm.
is the bottom slightly larger than the top?
Oh,
It
yeah.
looks like there's some sort of trim that at least, and part of it is the fact that there was a rail at the very bottom of the porch that won't be recreated. It just seems like if we keep that narrow base of the post without putting even, perhaps even some trim, right, where that turned element stops and the base, just becomes a regular square. It's just going to look a little top heavy. Because you're right, the post does draw in as you go down, but then it seems like the base is slightly larger to accommodate that weight. You see that?
Mhm.
Anyone?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good observation. I agree with that.
So maybe
Beef up that.
even yeah, or creating a bit of trim
It out.
to create some visual
So
heft.
here's a thought for you then. And this is answering your question, Florence, about the hardware and how we attach the post. So if we were to extend the bottom out so it looks like the picture on your right, what we can do is attach the hardware like we would a normal deck and then encase that with the trim to buff that out a little bit, and then you have no visual of the hardware underneath.
That's a viable solution. Yeah. If the railing and the balusters are done as original, as historically accurate, then they would not be to code, but they would meet the owner's current function. Is that right? Would the door be functional?
It currently is functional. It just has a screw in it.
What I'm wondering is, can we just go with the historic, and then if somebody, and make it so that it's, phase one is historic, phase two is, if you want to use this, this is how you adapt it. And so anybody who wants to use it would be able to adapt it to current code.
I just think adapting it later on would cause a lot of grief.
Okay.
I think that there should be a one decision
Okay.
that then works. I think even maintaining this amount of exposed wood will be a huge lift, let alone trying to change the design here in 10 or 15 years when anew.
I think we have a unicorn right now who we're working with. So I think we should do what we can. I feel like this is the best person I've seen on this committee, or who's willing and talented and putting in the elbow grease. So I would love to not kick it forward, but give it to a person who deeply cares about their craft personally.
Can you clarify what, are you making a suggestion, Susan? Specifically?
Oh, perfect, perfect. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah,
I
I
just was
jumped
saying,
ahead. Yeah.
I just,
I jumped
I was just
ahead.
trying.
Yeah, so if that may be a good segue. Are there any other questions for the applicant?
I'm so sorry, I probably not said this. So what is the original height of the, uh-huh,
It's probably a foot below what is proposed, I'd
Yeah,
say.
it
2 feet.
appears to be about 22 to 24 inches. That's my guess.
And the windowsill matches kind of if you go along, which I'm sure, you know, so, and it would, it would not match that windowsill.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, is that
Yeah.
the current railing is designed to skirt the bottom of the windows.
It's hard because it's not safe. And, you know, and also too, that's the thing about a historic building, right? It was like 100 years ago, people just were different. It was, everybody's gotten taller, but, so. I don't know. I personally think it should be to code and just made to look as close to, you know, with the, dimensions of it, so it doesn't look so.
Well, and to, oh,
Thanks, Sandy. So any other questions? Okay, so now would be the time we open the hearing for public comments. If there's any neighborhood district chairs, they'll have 3 minutes, and then the general public will have 2 minutes. Are there any members of the public here for comment? Okay. Then we will have our discussion as a commission and entertain any motions or amendments to this proposal.
just to clarify your point, either way, the railings would be the code, Wendy. You could build them high and reach that 36 inches, or you build the posts high, keep the railings low, and then just put a thin bar of metal across the top. It's just, you know, a matter of what we want to do.
I've Googled and have not been able to see an example of the thin bar with the balcony. When I've looked through.
Maybe the easiest, well, I can't break into your phone.
Oh, I'll break into it.
I'm
Here
like,
you go.
okay. Probably the best example that people might have in their mind would be the railings in the former Hotel Utah. They were lower and they were very decorative. And then the powers that be currently overseeing that building decided to remove those railings. Originally, the proposal was to put a bar above the railings to make them to code because they were too short for code. But rather than that, they removed all the railings and put the modern brass ones in. If you look at the railings in that lobby now, they are too tall. Visually, the former proportions were more pleasing, but they decided to go with the taller railings for code or whatever. When, you know, the other solution, in fact, that was Roger Jackson, who was the architect over the project from FFKR. That was his initial proposal, to put some sort of decorative bar over the top and maintain the original railing or the balustrade, but instead they removed them. I'm sorry.
It's okay. In my nerdiness, when I go to see like Virginia Woolf's house or around, if it's someone I deeply feel connected to, I'd want it to be OG and have the bar. If it's not an icon, I'm more for just the balustrade. And this is a Potter. I don't know how iconic it was, the first pottery, right? But otherwise, I don't know if I'd feel like it was a terrible thing to make it to code.
Before we get going too further, maybe it's good to kind of review our options here.
Yes.
So we can adopt the application as is with no changes. That's one option. We can amend it with our comments for conditions as a second, or we can again continue this to another hearing. So with those on the table, is there anyone in favor currently that they think we need another round of an application? Or, go
Yeah,
ahead, Florence.
there were a couple of drawings that were not to scale, specifically the post, and we've talked about that post on the right of the it's on the drawings. Top right. If we were to, and then the shape of the baluster, those are the two things that I would like to see again. To scale with more of a historic reference.
Okay.
I think that the floor plan, the footings, we did discuss an alternate option for that. I'm fine with that as a discussion. Noting that they will be beefier, but that would come up with the. So those two, the baluster and the post drawings, is what I would like to see again.
I sympathize with a lot of the comments made that, I mean, people always complain that historic preservation is burdensome, and making the applicant, Merrill and Isabella, the owner, come back with more drawings is perhaps tipping over there into that line. But I do agree with Florence that knowing what we're approving is always a good idea before we approve it.
There are two, okay, go ahead, Eric. You were going to say something else.
I was going to ask if there are any others in favor of continuing, not, this isn't a formal vote, but just kind of a straw poll. So David and Florence, am I right? You two would vote to continue the item.
I'd like to explore whether we can, my concern is over the years when we continue things, we eat away at the reservoir of goodwill because people want to make progress on their things. So I'm looking for a middle ground here. Can we give positive signals? Can we, Dustin, perhaps there's an efficient way we can move forward on this without continuing it to another meeting where we could make progress without the inevitable delays that come up? Do you have any suggestions on how we might do something like that?
Yeah, so sometimes what we do in that situation is if there's clear guidelines on what it is you're looking for that can be articulated to the applicant, that they can potentially do those changes, and then staff could review them. That doesn't have to bring it back to a hearing. That's an option we've.
And could that
done.
review include commissioners, or if it includes commissioners, does it necessarily have to be a public meeting?
That's a good question.
I mean, Florence has raised some really important issues. I'd love to have her have eyes on it again.
Yeah.
But I'd also love to make progress on this issue.
I agree, Jeff. I think that our the owner's representative, Merrill, is going in the direction that we really want. I want to be on the same team.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jeff.
I think last time we said to him, because he had his OG computer thing, just give us sketches where we can better see it. And so we didn't say like really give us the, you know what I mean? So I would love to move that if Florence had the time, because you've taken such care and he taken such care, and Dustin worked together. So he could just jump forward on this with Isabella.
Yeah, I think, thinking about it, I think we could do something like that where, your motion could say that it's, we could approve this subject to these changes being made that would be verified by staff and, maybe one of the commissioners. And if in that review, the applicant wasn't satisfied with the direction we gave them, like, oh, change that, if we got too demanding and they said, no, they could come back to the commission as a whole. That could be an option as well. That way, when we review it, if we don't maybe feel like it's getting there, and so we provide some feedback and then they feel like that feedback's too onerous, then they can say, we'd like to just come back to the commission and get their opinion as opposed to whatever staff's saying.
Great. That's good to know. Okay, so then in my opinion, I see we either continue this or we have some clear conditions, approval with clear conditions. And kind of to echo what Jeff mentioned, what was lacking from the previous application was a clear design intent. And I feel like this is definitely a step in the right direction, if not something that we can give a basis for appropriateness on. Keeping that in mind, there's a phrase rattling around in my head that may get me expelled from this commission, but that's just, let's not make perfect the enemy of good. And I think that we can get there with some conditional approval. So then with those two options, continuing or conditional approval, what's the temperature here for the commission? How do we still feel like this is something we need an additional hearing for?
I don't think we need a full additional hearing.
Okay.
If there's something in between so that the owner and the contractor can move forward. To me, these are little tweaks, just kind of just documenting that we're talking about the same thing. And yeah, I like the idea of, I would like to move forward with
Great.
some minimal conditions.
Okay. May I borrow your pencil, Lawrence? Let's note some of those.
And from my point of view, the only conditions would be that that the owner comes back with a more accurate to-scale drawing of the posts that are holding up the deck and the balusters.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Could we go back to the picture of the balusters? That she sent you?
The teardrops.
Do we want to clarify which of those? Because I guess I'm feeling like that one's important. Do we want this one that's the fourth to the, like, yeah. Do we want to clarify which one we want? Because that to me seems, that's probably more important to me probably than
Yeah.
anything else.
We could, I would like the contractor's input on what's reasonable. I've never used a lathe with any success. I have all my fingers, so I guess that was some success. It's,
Oh, I see. Something that's not too complicated. Yeah. Like even like the one on the right, the up here on the right that you sent to. That's not too intricate. Uh-huh.
the one on
The right of your screen,
the far right.
top right.
I believe that's going to be a little awkward to meet code
Mm. Okay.
because of the difference of the size. I think if we're doing a 36-inch, then that
The
the
fourth
one in the yellowish
Uh-huh.
on the far right.
Mhm.
That seemed to me to match the character the closest because it does have that sort of
Yeah.
spherical orb integrated with it. Do we want to make that our recommendation as not necessarily matching that, but that is the,
And yeah, that one or, and there could be some variation because that does bulge a little bit too, and that's going to cause some problems with how it looks and keeping and conforming to code. The straighter it is, the easier it will be to have something that's aesthetically pleasing and not too many of them. So I'd like to give the contractor some room on
Mhm.
that and not.
yeah, I
and-
would, if we were to make that a condition, my thought is to just use that as design inspiration,
Yeah,
not
it's a visual
necessarily like
reference.
for like.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that one right next to it on the next right, in the yellow box, top.
Yeah,
right
the one on the
I
fifth
think
over.
that one is going to be
Mhm.
easier to meet code and space them not so close together.
Well, and I think that's actually a good next item of discussion is the code comments. Because with these balusters, we could keep the historic spacing and like David mentioned, put a slim rod in between, which if we also carried the shorter railing height and put a top rail to meet the code height, those now have a relation.
Hmm.
There's not just a single element at the top. There's also rods in between balusters, so it's not as much a foreign element, just
To have
placed
another
on
one
top.
above it. Yeah.
right.
And just to clarify my own position on that, I'm not going to, stick to I'm going to vote along with the majority of the commission on that point.
Yeah.
Could we give the owner an option on that one and whichever they prefer that they put forward?
Yeah, I think if I pay money for something, I want the iron bar, but if I'm not paying money to see a house, I want what the owner wants.
Yeah. I guess for me is that when you look at the original pictures of the home, your eye always goes up to that. And so that's for me is the most important thing is that balcony. That's like what catches your eye. So that's, is it those balusters just look a certain way? And that it looks intentional. That's my opinion.
So I guess to kind of close this for the balusters,
Owner can decide, I guess, is the consensus.
whether to space them close enough to
Oh,
not have the 4-inch sphere in the code. So we'll leave that up to their option, is what we're saying.
Yeah, since we're divided, I mean, either way would be historic, would be appropriate. I think that it's fair to leave it up to the owner. That's my
Mhm.
suggestion on that.
Okay. And I'll put the same thing for the railing height question.
I know that this is late stages to raise another issue, but can I just ask the commission one additional question about the upper rail? Those finials in the historic photos appear to be resting on maybe a flared base, not just directly, like buns on a post. Would it be unreasonable to ask those finial balls to be elevated?
I think that's a great call on a detail there that that I overlooked. Yeah, thank you.
I apologize. I was writing notes for the last item. So
Just raise the, currently in the scale drawings, the finials are just round balls directly
set
on the,
directly on top.
but just raise them up through some sort of base. I don't think we need to be terribly specific on what sort of base that is, but just so that
Can
they're
we
a little
go-
bit more elegant than just a ball on a stick of wood.
Can we go back to the drawings? And over on the far right, there's a little rail post. It's not to scale,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it does show that intent. Is that what you're talking about, David?
Yeah, I think in the historic photos are raised like, I guess that's fine.
It doesn't flatten at the bottom? Is that what you?
The kind of collar that the orb sits on should be smaller
Perhaps
to give some separation between the top of the rail and
some
finial.
visual lift.
Okay. What if we were to include that as a detail to be reviewed?
Yeah. I mean, I think originally it was the ball and then some sort of flared base.
Yeah, I think that, yeah. I think the intent from the contractor is to do that.
Yeah.
And, just getting into a detailed drawing at this size is really difficult to do.
I'll put that under our item for the further discussion with staff and the applicant. Okay. So my three conditions so far, the owner and representative meeting with staff and the commission to discuss this, to review the new 2-scale drawing of the elevation view, as well as final details, including that railing top. And then leaving the baluster and also the railing height for the owner's options in regards to spacing of the balusters to meet code and whether to use the rod on top to meet the 36-inch minimum.
And a note about the rod on top, the 36-inch minimum. If you were to put it at the 36-inch and you had the balusters at the historic height, about 24 inches, that would mean you'd need to put 2 rods in, 2 horizontal rods.
Yeah, I think what you'd have to do is ultimately play with the proportion of the rod and and that's something that could be decided in the meeting if that happens.
Okay. Were there other conditions that I haven't noted? Okay. Are we ready to entertain a motion?
Yes.
I have a cheat sheet here. If someone wants to start it.
Let's just do it.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they are shorthand, but hopefully they make sense to you, Florence.
Do I propose? Do I make a motion?
Make a motion.
Make a motion that we approve with conditions so that we don't need to meet again as a commission. And the conditions are the owner and or the owner's representative will meet with staff and at least one member of the Landmarks Commission to review the corrected scale drawings, elevation view, and review final details, such as the rail top. As far as the second condition is that the baluster is that we use example number 4 and 5 on the yellow rectangle, the top. Use those as an inspiration, as a reference, not necessarily an absolute copy. And that the railing height, that the owner decides if the railing needs to meet code, which is 36 inches above the floor level. And the owner can decide of the two options, which one meets their needs better. Either doing a new railing that meets that height, or doing a historic railing with the proportions and then adding a rail in between.
That's great. Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second the motion.
Great. So then we'll call for a vote, right? All in favor of,
Do we have to go one by one?
okay, sorry. Wendy, how would you vote?
I say yes.
Approve?
Also approved with the conditions noted?
Yes.
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 All right. The motion passes unanimously with the conditions for approval as noted. Now we will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I motion to adjourn this meeting. Anyone second the
Second
motion?
that?
I second.
Now all in favor.
I.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.